Thank you, everyone. So we start with the question of Vivian. She asked the question about what is neshama? What is the depth of this word about neshama? How to understand neshama, and which is something we are still having question about. So, Sam, would you like to share with us a little bit further about what is neshama?
The full question here is, here's an interesting question that came from Vivian. What do you think of the article from the Messianic Jew about the word neshama, from the root Shem, which means name, at the following site? So she's actually we're referring to neshama, but we're looking at it from a specific site. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually go over to the site that she refers to, and we're going to take a look at it there. You should now see on the screen a website called Ancient Hebrew Research Center. Can somebody confirm that that's what they're seeing?
Yes. Yes, Sam.
Okay, great. This is the origin of this question, and you can see down here the word. Well, this is written in Hebrew, but this is the word neshama, and so the whole question is brought up as a result of this and what is mentioned here on this page. I'm bringing this up because we're going to go into neshama a little bit, but on this page, there, as she said, it's written by a Messianic, from a Messianic Jewish point of view. And I'm bringing that up because I know that a certain number, I don't know whether it's a minority or a majority, but a number of my readers look into Jewish texts and Messianic texts and listen to what some rabbis have to say when they're commenting on scripture. So that's why I wanted to just get into this and see where what I'm teaching and what they're teaching, how it coincides or how it differs. So I'm going to just read what it says here. The Hebrew word, because this actually does not talk about neshama directly. It talks about, you'll see here, the Hebrew word for name is Shem. And that Shem, and it gives a Strong's reference. And the Hebrew word, and here it is, neshama, and you can see it here, neshama, and this is the word that Vivian asked the question around, is formed by the letters mem here and the letter hey. I'm reading them in Hebrew. The letters M and hey to the word Shem. Oh, okay. I just got it mixed up a bit here because actually there's a mistake. It should be the letters N, Nun, and Hey to the word Shem, because you can see, and this is where you have to compare these two letters, Shem, to the word neshama, right up here. Those two letters that I just showed you, these two letters here, are the same as the middle two letters. Now, this second letter, and we're reading from right to left, the mem here, this mem is slightly different from this mem. And the reason for that is that there are 5 letters that change their presentation when they're at the very end of a word. And the end, of course, is on the left. So the mem is one of them. So that's why there's a slight change of presentation of this word, but the letter is identical. So what we have here is this word here, Shem, and you can see it, which means name. And there are two extra letters, the nun, the first one here, and the N, as he's, unfortunately, he put an M, but it's an N, and then the H. Okay, so the N and the H have been added to the word Shem. And the word used in Genesis 2:7 means breath. All right, and that is, he's got the King James Version translation there. The Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground and blew into his nostrils the breath. And this is the neshama, the breath of life. The man became a living soul. So I'm just going to go ahead and read this as is. While the Western mind simply sees breath as the exchange of air within the lungs, the ancient Hebrew mind understood the breath in an entirely different way, as can be seen in Job 32:8. All right, so we can take a look at Job 32:8, but I want to read how he has written Job 32:8 here. He has written, the wind within man and the breath, and here we see the neshama of the Almighty teaches them. Now, I'm going to switch and I'm going to read. Can you see that I've changed the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so you see Job, and I'm going to put in 32:8. And we're going to read it in the King James. So here it is. But there is a spirit in man, and the inspiration of the Almighty gives them understanding. So here we see spirit in man. Here we see inspiration, and the inspiration here is the original Hebrew word neshama. And it's the inspiration of God, of the Almighty, and it's this inspiration, this neshama. This is how it is, the understanding of the English translation. The inspiration of the Almighty gives understanding. Now, this is in Hebrew, this is the word binah, and I'm not going to necessarily go into this, but I want you to understand what's written here in English. There's a spirit in man. That's the ruach, as I think most of us know. And then we also have the inspiration of the Almighty, and this is the neshama. And the neshama gives understanding. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here, and once again, I'm just assuming that you see that we've switched screens again. Here it says the wind within man. So notice here it says wind, whereas we saw that in the King James, it said the spirit in man and the breath of the Almighty. And there in the King James, it said the inspiration of the Almighty. And it says here, the inspiration of the Almighty teaches them. Okay, so there's a switch in the meaning here, because it says that here it says that the neshama teaches. In the English in the King James translation, it says the inspiration gives them understanding. It doesn't say that it teaches them. It says it gives them something. And that something is understanding, whereas here it doesn't say that it gives them anything. It just says it teaches them. So there's a modification in the way this is presented with this translation. Now, the question is, why does the author of this article that we're looking at, why does he use this translation? The answer to that is, and I'm not going to get into it, but if we come up here, you can see he has what's called the MT. And the MT is what's called a mechanical translation. It's his own translation, but it's done in a very special way, and that's why he calls it mechanical. All right. And the mechanical translation is, and this is very, very interesting, and it's something that we ought to understand. And that is that, remember that neshama, for instance, is mentioned about 24 times in the Bible. Okay. And actually, what I'm going to do is, let's just go back here. And I'm going to switch here to Strong's and verse 8. And here we have neshama. So neshama is 5397. It's going to show up here. And you can see the number of translations that we have: blast, breath, and there's inspiration. That's what we see in Job 32:8, soul and spirit. Now, the difference between the King James translations, where the translators realized that there are various meanings to this word, as opposed to what Brenner in his mechanical translation has done, he always translates the word with the same English word. Always with the same English word. So every time you see neshama, it's going to be breath. Okay? And every time you see ruach, he's translated it with wind. So this is the difference here between these two translations. And then he goes on to say, our Western understanding of the breath does not easily grasp the concept that a breath can teach. See, now that's why I emphasized what I said before. The breath here, he says the breath teaches, whereas the King James says the breath, the neshama, gives understanding. While our Western understanding can easily associate thoughts and emotions with the function of the mind. So now he's adding the mind in here. The Easterner sees the same function in the breath. In other words, the breath giving emotions and thoughts. The breath of both men and God has the ability to carry thoughts and emotions. So in one sense, he's correct. That's not necessarily the understanding of neshama as I've expressed it, okay? But I want to go just a little bit further here, and maybe we'll come back to that, because he goes here, a name is a person's breath. Now, you see what he's done here. He's taken the meaning of the two letters, Shem, and he's taken it out of neshama, and he says he's equated the word name, the Shem name, with a person's breath, which he adds on here, the breath, which is his character. In other words, his thoughts and emotions. And so the question is, this is the question that I have, is name the equivalent of breath? Is name character, etc., etc.? And then he goes on, and I'm not going to necessarily, if you want, you can read the rest of this context here. I'm not necessarily going to go on and read this, although, okay, I will make a comment on this, because there's another error here in what he says. Hebrew names have meanings that are lost when translated into English. And I'm just adding this as a parenthesis. We're going to come back to Shem in just a minute. The Hebrew word Adam means man. Now, I think most of us understand that and know it, and that's correct. And is also, and now here, look what he says, and is also the name of the first man, Adam. Now, that also is correct. It is the name of the first man. But notice what he says here. The Lord God formed the man, Adam, which is Strong's one, from the dust of the ground. English translations completely erase the Hebraic connection between the man and his origin. Now, notice this, man and his origin. when we place the original Hebrew words back in the text, we can see the connection between the words in this verse. And the Lord formed the Adam, and notice here that he's put Adam with a capital A, from the dust of adamah. And you can see the relationship between Adam and adamah. So he's saying that, as he says here, we can place the origin of man to the adamah. There is obviously, and totally agree with this, a relationship between the name, between this word Adam and adamah. It's clear. But, and here's the but, and this is where, as far as my understanding of this is incorrect, that here in this particular verse, and this is Genesis 2, verse 7, this is the creation of the first human being. And the Lord formed the Adam. And here it is not referring to Adam as the name of the individual. It is referring to the first human being. Now, we know the first human being was a man, but it is not the man Adam. It is the first human, and it represents all human beings. That's what's important here to remember. And the Lord formed the Adam, and it does say the. So that's another little indication. I don't want to go too far with these indications, but you would not say the and say, if it was a woman, let's say, you wouldn't say formed the Barbara. Or if it was another man, you wouldn't say formed the Peter. That doesn't make sense. Even in English, it doesn't make sense. But it does make sense to read this. He formed the man, right? Or the human. So this is the understanding. And the second point that I want to make clear here is that he didn't form man from the ground. And this is adamah here, from the ground. He formed man from the dust of the ground. Now you might say, what's the difference between dust and adamah? Well, okay, let's just do it here. I'm coming back to this verse in Genesis 2, verse 7. Okay, dust. So here we've got adamah 127, and here the dust. So let's just take a look at this. All right. Afar, that's the name of it. And then clay, hence clay, earth, mud. Now, it can be used in this sense, but look at the translations here. King James, KJV is King James Version and the translations. And we've got ashes, dust, ground, earth, ground, mortar, powder. And look at this word, rubbish. And look also at this word, ashes. All right. And so the question, and this is the 7 keys to master biblical Hebrew here. And the fact that the first key is that a Hebrew word can have multiple translations. And the question is, why do they have multiple translations? And why in this particular verse do we have this for this particular word? Why did these Hebrew scholars who translated the Masoretic text, why in certain places, maybe just once, I'd have to check, why did they translate this word rubbish and ashes, where as here, it's the dust of the ground? Okay, so this is a whole study. And this is the importance of proper word studies. So we're looking at the meaning of dust, and we are in the context of the formation of a man. And basically, in one sense, without going into all of the details and ramifications right now, it's equating man, that is humans, with rubbish. That's what it's doing. That's what it's telling us, this context here. Now, How is man rubbish? Well, I think that most of us can answer that because we're all sinners. As one verse in Isaiah says, our righteousness is as filthy rags. That's rubbish. And ashes sort of follows in that trend as well. Okay, so yes, we are also earth, and Adam is related to adamah, no problem there, but we're lower than that. We are less than that. It's interesting, and I'm not going to once again go into all of this, but the animals are made from the ground. The animals are made from adamah. It doesn't talk about dust of the ground for them. It only talks about dust of the ground for humans. So there's an incredible lesson in understanding that meaning. And unfortunately, all of this explanation that we have here for neshama, when he goes into Adam and all of that is obliterated. All of that is just set aside. Okay, so now what I want to do is we're back here and we're still in neshama, and I want us to understand certain things about these various aspects of Hebrew going on here. First of all, he is basically saying in what is written here that the root of neshama is Shem. Does he say root? No, he doesn't say root, but somewhere he said, "Oh, it's formed. It's formed by adding the letters to the word Shem." Okay, now I'm not going to say Shem is not a part of this. We will come back to that in just a second. But the point is that the word neshama, the basis of the word neshama, is not Shem. The basis of the word neshama is different. And I want to show you that. We're going to come back here and breathe into his nostrils the breath. So here we have the breath, 5397, and it's up here. So these are the words for breath. And here it says that it comes from, which means it's going to show us whenever it says comes from and it gives the Strong's number, that means it's coming from another word, and that this other word is the root. And in fact, it gives us the root here, just following with the three letters nasham. But I'm going to go over here, 5395, and we see the word nasham, a primitive root, generally the primitive root with three letters, whereas Shem only had two letters. But here we have three letters, properly to blow away and destroy. Now, I think most of you are aware of this, but if you're not, let us put this root word in context here, and in the context of Genesis 2, verse 7. Genesis 2, verse 7 is one of these founding verses. And why do I say a founding verse? Because it is the creation of humans. This verse, there's one verse here that tells us the creation of humans and gives us a good portion of the content that God used to make humans and the composition of what a human is. I'm not going to get into that, but part of that composition is the neshama that God breathed into the nostrils. And from what it says here, he became the man, and this is again Adam. So it's not Adam with a capital A. He became a living soul, obviously, but here it says, and man. So humans became living souls. This is the the initial creation of all human beings, of which we are now 8 billion worldwide. And he became a living soul. So this is the initial, let's say, birth. All right. Now, what's so strange about this is that the origin, the root of this word, neshama, that in this verse gives breath, look at its meaning. It's destroy, which is the total opposite of the context of Genesis 2, verse 7. And of course, here, as most of you know now, this is the second key to master biblical Hebrew. And that is that the same word can have contradictory meanings. And this is one of the most misunderstood concepts about Hebrew. In fact, I've told this anecdote before. When I began to, I learned Hebrew when I was about 11 or 12 years old. That's when I began to start to learn Hebrew. And I lived in Israel a couple of years and sort of perfected, well, I won't say perfected, I learned Hebrew, but the common language that's spoken today in Israel. At that time, I was not interested in the Bible at all. I didn't, I wasn't converted. I didn't know anything about God. And then from Israel, I went to Belgium. And in Belgium, that's where I heard about, I'm not going to go into the details. I heard about the Bible, I heard about God, and I began to do a deep study at that time and learned Hebrew. And then, of course, I went into the ministry and et cetera, et cetera. And I left the ministry and I went into a deep study about Bible. And I saw certain things like this contradictory meaning here of words. And I decided before I started writing the books and developing the explanation, I said, look, this is my idea. I've got to check this out. And so I took 2 years of biblical Hebrew with the Biblical Hebrew Institute in Jerusalem. This was online. So we had a biblical Hebrew teacher, and I was in class. It was a small class. I think there were about 4 or 5 students, and we spent a year together, and then I followed it up the next year. We had a different teacher there was one student that remained, but we still had a class of another 3 or 4 people. But the point is this, that I mentioned in the class, I asked the teacher specifically, can Hebrew words have contradictory meanings? And the teacher told me no. No, they don't have contradictory meanings. And so I had thought I had discovered this. And as the class went on through the year, and as we got into vocabulary, I would say, hey, look, this word has 2 opposite meanings. And finally, the teacher came around and the students came around and they realized, hey, yes, this is correct. And by the end of the year, they were pointing out that words had double meanings, contradictory meanings. And this is why I absolutely wanted to verify that what I was teaching, the expounding of the Bible and God's word as I do it is correct. And you can see it here for yourself with the word nasham. This is very important. And why is it very important? It's because can we translate nasham with the same English word each time when a Hebrew word can have opposite meanings? See, this is the problem with the mechanical translation. Excuse me, but it can't be done. It just can't be done. And so that's why we have this kind of a problem. So this is the meaning of nasham. I'm not going to go into why it means destroy, why it means give life. That's for another episode. But I do want to explain something else about Messianic interpretations, why we have to be very, very careful here. What I want to explain to you here is how a lot of people go about doing word studies and where we have to be very, very careful with interpreting words. As you just saw, root words have 3 letters. Neshama had 5 letters. And the way some people do word studies, and in fact, quite a number of people do word studies, and I'm going to explain how they do it. The nun, which is down here, okay, here's the nun. You can see that in English. And that is in nasham, would here the letter has 3 meanings: seed, fish, and life. So we have to decide when we see the word nasham, whether the first letter, the nun in nasham, whether it's referring to a seed, to a fish, or to life. And you can see there are 3 different things here, 3 different elements here, although, the seed is the beginning of life, and then you can begin to get into all of the understandings of the relationship between these letters. Then the next word is the shin, the nasham. It's this word, it's this letter here. And so we have the shin, and this one also has 3 meanings. Look at it: eat, consume, and destroy. I'm not going to get into the question of how did these letters get these meanings. That's another story as well. But I'm just showing you that these letters have 3 meanings: eat, consume, and destroy. And then the last letter was mem, nasham. And mem, here it is, has 2 meanings: water and chaos. Water and chaos. So the way that these people do word studies is to take a look at these words. Now, I want you to know we've got 3 words here, we've got 2 words here, and another 3 for shin. So we've got 3, 6, 8 words. And they create a story for this word. This is the study. They create a story for the word nasham based on these 8 words. And that's their method of doing a word study. Now, we're about 6 people here in this Bible study. We could take 8 people, 10 people, 12 people, and I'd say to you, please make a story using these. You can only use 3 words here out of the 8. And I guarantee you that practically all of us are going to come up with a different story. And of course, as these people, a lot of these Messianic people, they do the study and they come up with their story. You have different Messianic stories. And then, of course, you have the argumentation between which story is the best story. There's no end to it. And this is unfortunately what happens, and where you have all of the rabbinical concepts and ideas, and is this one the right one, and the supposed wisdom and the debating that goes on. Now, I want you to notice something very clearly here, and that is that none of this is biblical. None of these words take us back into the Bible. None of these words actually take us into the full word nasham. All of this is just dealing with letters. This is exterior. This is not a word study. This is more of a letter study and how to arrange the letters. And that's not what we're referring to here. And so I'm just going to put up, let me see, yeah, here. So I'm hoping you're seeing the screen again change with the puzzle piece here. Can you see that, G?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So we've got the puzzle piece here, and what they're doing is they're trying to figure out, because a puzzle piece is, I compare it to a word. So the word nasham here. All right. So the contours gives us is nasham. And the idea is to find out the meaning of the word nasham. What those other type of word studies are simply looking at the contours to try and figure out what is the contour of the nun, the mem, and the shin. And so they're not getting into the Bible. Whereas when we study it, and as far as I'm concerned anyway, a real word study is neshama, all right? And then what we want to do is, because we've got these words, blast, breath, inspiration, soul, and spirit, and then we have this additional tool here is the Hebrew concordance for this word. And so I clicked on this, and now we've opened up every single verse in the Bible where we find this word. And so we can look and see here it says breathe. Look at this. Here it says the blast. Here it says breathe again, breath, blast, breathe. There are 24 of these verses. Breathe. There's our translation, inspiration. The same one that we see over here on the right, okay? Now, we have to, that's the Bible study. That's the word study. It's what the Bible tells us. And we're really getting into what I call the concept of what is theology. Theology, if we take the translation of that word, it is theos, God, and then logi, or the study of. What are we studying here? Are we studying our ideas about God, which is when we do a study on the letters, they're trying to figure out what the letters say. They're not going into the Bible. That is their study of what they think God is all about, what God says. On the other hand, when we go and look at the word and we look at these contexts on the left here, which all contain this word and the context of this word, and we can see it, then we're looking into God's viewpoint, because this is God's word. This is God's inspired word. And if we want God's intended meaning, we've got to go here. So that's the difference between I would say, the difference in word studies. So the point I'm going to make, and this is going to be the last statement about this question, is that not all word studies are equal. Okay. And I will add, I said it's the last word and I lied. the most of the word studies do it the Messianic way. They look at the letters. People will quote and talk about Strong's, but they don't use it to look at the actual verses that contain the word. Okay, so we're going to end that there. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen. There we go. And we're all back together here. So
thank you.
We're going to take the second question. That was Katrina's question.
Yes, Sam, thank you for the first question. And this was really refreshing. And a lot of people, a lot of materials for nowadays about Messianic Hebrew things, and but not everything. I would like to just confirm that not everything is using the original way of the Hebrew roots, right? Because if you go to the real knowledgeable Jews, they know what is the root of the word, and They don't usually just like travel down to the letters because every root has its it's like things has its origin. And but with you, it's always going back to the Bible, and that's how we that's a huge difference. And yes, so thank you. And Katrina had a question. Katrina, would you like to share your question yourself? Because I don't have all your questions here. Would you like?
Sure. Okay. So recently I was studying, and there was a theologian that's very famous. I didn't put his name out there, but that was talking about the last days, and he was using Revelations 13:18, and he was talking about the number 666, which I've heard people talk about that number before, and it always seems to be something evil. But for him, he was saying that the six give us, I guess, revelations about who God is, being the Trinity. That's what he said. And then he was saying the other six was representing the devil, Satan, the great dragon. He was saying that that was like a Trinity also, but it was more of an evil one. And then he said the other six was representing man because man was made on the sixth day. So I tried to do a study on my own, but of course Greek is not quite the same as Hebrew, so it wasn't really working out. The six did seem to be for man, but the other two I wasn't sure, so I brought it to you, Sam.
Okay, so this is once again, we could spend quite a bit of time on this, which we don't have, but we're going to get to the crux of the matter. Now, I'm going to again. I told you a little bit about the history of how I got into the Hebrew and all of that. I'm going to give you a bad example, one of my bad examples, to illustrate this 666 thing. And that is, of course, it talks about the beast. There are actually, in Revelations, there are two beasts. There's what we would call the political beast and the religious beast. All right? And they are evil. It is the beast is the Babylon, etc. So it is evil, it is bad, and it explains how these beasts are going to come up and how they're going to, one of the beasts is going to have people bow down to the other beast, and they're sort of going to be the kings and the rulers of earth. And so that's what's going to happen. And so this is in the midst of prophecy. And so people have always been trying to figure out what does 666 mean? What is the meaning? And this scholar that you're talking about, in fact, this is the first time that I've heard it presented that way, which is sort of interesting and also related to the Trinity. I'd never heard that before. But anyway, the point, just to mention it, when I was a young minister, and I gave a sermon at a festival one time, and I explained what 666 was and who it refers to, because it's actually the name. It refers to the name. If you understand it, you'll understand the name and you'll understand what prophecy is. And I explained, Bible in hand, who this person was. And it was somebody, it was actually I believe it was the no, I'm not sure whether he was a prime minister, but it was in Germany, and he was the head of Bavaria. His name was Strauss. And we thought that he was going to be the beast within the church. I mean, this was a sort of a common belief. And so I wasn't preaching heresy with regard to what the church understood. And so I got up and I preached this. And then, of course, what happened? Well, a few months later, he died. I'll tell you, I learned a big, 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 big lesson after that. So and if it's quite probable that you know, maybe you haven't thought about it, but I do not talk about prophecy. I did a few shorts, less than 1 minute videos on prophecy, just to mention, and actually during those videos, I mentioned, be careful about what people are saying about prophecy, because the lesson is just don't get involved and don't get into dates and meanings and whatever. So I am going to share my screen with you here, but I'll tell you one thing straight away. I am not going to tell you who 666 is. I'm pretty sure that you weren't expecting me to tell you that anyway. But what I am going to do is I am going to explain to you how they get to 666. And for that, I'm going to share my screen here. I'm going to come back to, you're seeing up on the screen here, Hebrew and Greek alphabet and numerical values. So I'm going to make, just before we get into this very quickly, I'm going to make a comment on the Trinity thing. 666 obviously is, there are 3 numerals there. And this person has interpreted it as a trinity, or seems to be headed that way. Again, I don't know any of the details. And in fact, one of the questions that I had put up in the forum revolved around the Trinity. Definitely you're not going to get that to that today, but it's an extremely interesting question because, of course, it's a very, very common Christian belief. In fact, it might be the most common Christian belief, other than, of course, that Christ is our Savior, etc. So I'm not going to get into that aspect of it. What I want to do is once again explain how Messianic Jews go about this, and explain that this is there probably is a basis to this, because the Bible does say 666, and that it says that we should understand it. So how should we understand it? Okay, well, there's a whole method of counting in the Bible that is used. And basically it's this: the Old Hebrew alphabet has 22 letters, the ancient 27 letters, and both alphabets together, they have the 49, and that's, of course, 7 times 7. Again, I don't necessarily want to get into all of this, but what I want to show you here is that each letter has a numeric value. So the first letter is 1, the second letter is 2, and then the 22nd letter here is, oh no, it's not the 22nd. Okay. Yeah, it goes to 9. So the 9th letter, that the chetet is 9, and then it goes to 10, the yud. And of course, the yod is Yahweh, etc., is 10. And then from there, it goes 10 by 10s. So if you want 21, it would be Kaf and Aleph. It's sort of like if you want 11 in Roman letters, it would be the X and the I, the X being 10 and then plus 1, etc. So that's how we count here. And then it goes 20, 30. So 32 would be the Lamed and the Bet. And actually, that's Lev. That's in Hebrew, that's heart. So that the number for heart would be 32. And then it goes 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, up to 100. And then from there, it goes by hundreds, 200, 300, 400. So if you wanted, say, 432, no, let's take 427. So then it would be Taf, Bet, and 7, the Zayin. And so that's how you would write it if you wanted to write 427 in Hebrew letters. Now, with the interpretation of scripture, what you'll find is that they take the words in Hebrew, like neshama, let's say, and they'll calculate its value. So neshama would be the nun here, 50, the shin, 300, etc., etc., and then they just add it up, and that's how you get your value. So the point being that 666 is the total value of some word. And when it comes to the beast, it's the total value of the person's name. And so we have to figure out how that name adds up to 666. Now, I frankly don't remember whether Strauss added up to 666. It's a way back. But we've got one example. I'm only going to give you one example that I actually just looked this up, but I believe there are others, and that is Neron Caesar. And when you transpose that into Hebrew, Neron Caesar, you add up those letters and boom, you've got 666. And of course, some people will say, well, he was a type of beast. And so the point being here is that sooner or later, somebody's going to come up. Now, they might have the title. That'll be 666. It might not be necessarily the name that will add up to 666. But the point is that somewhere along the line, something is going to add up to 666. Okay. And that will designate the beast. And those who are in the know will know it. We're going to have to be very, very careful. I don't want to go much further than that right now. I'm just going to say this, that there is a verse in the Bible that said that the lying, I forget the exact wording, will be so rampant as to even deceive the very elect themselves. So there's going to be a lot of mystery that people will be talking about. There'll be a lot of inferences as to the end time, and we've got a lot of, well, I won't say a lot of it, but there among certain Christian groups, you've got such an emphasis on this prophecy and everything that is interpreted. Of course, the war in Gaza is, I don't know if people want to call it a war, but it's sort of that anyway. What's going on in Gaza is interpreted as an end time sign. What's taking place in Ukraine is an end time design. What's happening with the U.S. election is an end time sign. And all of these end time signs are, leading us into catastrophe and the return of Christ, etc. And you still, it's crazy, but you've still got sects that are designating years. And I was reading something the other day about something that's going to happen at the end of this year, etc., etc., etc. So we have to back off from that. And that's frankly, ever since Strauss died, and as that sermon that I gave, I've backed off from this because it is important. It'll play its role when it happens, when it takes place, when it comes. But until then, we need to understand God's word in its depth, what God's word is all about, and as Christ said, as Paul said, let this mind be in you that is the mind of Christ. And that is what our goal is here and what we're trying to do. There will come a time when there's prophecy. I'll be right up front with you. I don't know if I'm going to be here. I'm not a spring chicken. We predicted things 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that we thought things were going to happen. The church that I was a part of, those things never took place. Most of the people of that generation, they're no longer with us. And so Christ is going to return. This will definitely take place. 666 will appear and we will know. But the point is, 666 is only one aspect of the entire picture. And we can't just focus on one aspect. There are many other aspects. And when the time comes, I'm sure we're going to know, and God will use his servants to help us understand what's going on. Until then, we're not going to focus on that. That's going to be my last word on this. Okay, does that help you, Katharina?
Yes, it does help.
Gee, I just think iPad had a question that she just wanted to ask.
Yes, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead. We're over time, so I don't know whether it depends on your question. But I could answer. Just go ahead and ask the question, and we'll see what it's all about.
Yeah, if it's too lengthy an answer, then maybe we can save it for next time. But it's more of a general question. So again, being new to this, I see like what you're saying in light of understanding the Hebrew. Like, it's like in your class, the difference between, when it was divide light, that God divided light from darkness, and they omitted that little word that went in the middle that represented a space. And like what you just said here, that there's a difference between dust of the ground and earth. And so that this is now what is becoming clear to me is, yes, there's a story, that these words are telling a story.
Right.
But my question is, if I can say it, so obviously God is the one who created the words to begin with. It's all about the words. When he said, let there be light, it meant that he would have to have already created the word light, meaning the meaning of what light was, so that when he spoke it, it became. Yes?
Yes.
So I guess the question would be, and just following along with you on all of these things, how like a Hebrew word can have so many different meanings and sometimes even contradictory meanings. And what you have to go through then to find the correct one is like, was there, obviously it can't be that God would have wanted it to be so complicated, or maybe he did, because it's like that thing about a mystery. It's like the parables. It's like, the hidden meanings. Or was this something purposeful done when the translators did it to make it so that maybe they would be the only ones to have the answer? Is that a good question?
That frankly is an excellent question. It's an excellent question, but I'm going to answer it in a very short. I'll give you a very short answer, but the answer is really quite incredible, because it shows, once again, it's all part of God's plan. The problem with us is, today everything's got to be instantaneous. We fast foods, fast lane, fast this, fast that, and God's not that way at all. God, he's got a long-term plan. As part of that long-term plan, one of the things that is absolutely amazing, he says, God says, he blinded the people, which is, one would think that is totally opposite of what God wants. You would think that God wanted people to come to him. But so why did he blind them? Which means that they couldn't understand. They couldn't have their eyes opened. So that's another question that's all part of this. But I'm going to get directly to your question. One of the ways that he blinded them was making the Bible, his word, difficult to understand. And he says, I've given them eyes to see, but they can't understand. They don't get it. Their eyes are darkened, etc., etc. And the way the Bible is written, people don't get it. And what you said is extremely important, and that is that these words are a story. How I explain this is that each word, as we can see here from the different translations, each word, and this is the seventh key. I don't know if you've gotten to it yet, but all of the six keys lead to the seventh key because each word tells a story. And unfortunately, people only, when they read it or when they see it like breath, all they think is air, and it is air, but that's only a part of the story. And so they have a story, but it's an incomplete story, and an incomplete story will get them off track. And this is why people are off track reading the Bible. To cut a long story short, is this, that God has one story. God's plan is just one story. And all of these stories of each word have to fit into that story. And that's why I compare God's plan to a huge puzzle with 1,000 or 1,000,000 pieces in it. And each word, each verse is just one story or a few stories put together. It's a part of this big story. So the words are like a the words are like a mini view. They give you an idea about one small concept. And then we have to assemble the pieces one by one. We find one, and how do the ones around it fit? You see? And this is what the problem with neshama is. When you say it's name, well, how does name fit with destroy? How does name fit with giving life? How do all of these pieces fit together? Because they've got to fit together, and they've got to fit together within the macro, because the macro puzzle. And that's what the whole idea of putting this together is. So you've got to, it's like putting a puzzle together. How do you start putting the puzzle together? Most people, well, I don't know how most people do it, but I know how I do it. I want to get all the pieces with the straight edges so I can get the border. How would you put a puzzle together if you got thousands of scrambled pieces and somebody told you, hey, look, you don't have one puzzle here, you've got 3 puzzles all together, and I'm not going to give you a picture for either of the 3 puzzles. That's what the Bible is. It's all thrown in there together, and you go figure it out. And some people are having great difficulty figuring it out. And so that's why that's why I try to help as best I can. I hope that begins at least to answer a little bit about your query.
Yes, it is the beginning. Of course, it like generates so many more questions, but it
Right.
makes sense. It makes sense because, and I'm like you, I would be the one to get the straight edges first. But if there's 3 puzzles all together, that's kind of a daunting task. So,
Yep.
but I love what you said. I'll not be long, but I love what you said about God kind of like blinding. In other words, and this is kind of too what I think about that nashama, like when God says that everyone is without excuse when it comes to their belief in God. And maybe that's because he put that in each person, the ability or the possibility or the capability to understand, so that everybody who says, no, I never, no, I believe there was no God, you don't have an excuse because God put it within you to at least seek and ask a question and to come to maybe, well, I don't know, but I want to know, God, are you out there? And so maybe that's it, is that he's looking for the people who want to understand, who want to be enlightened, who want the eyes open and the ears open, like Christ said.
Yeah. Kathy, you're on the right track. Okay. What I would say is be patient with yourself, because all of those questions do have answers. but maybe not the answers that you're used to. So you're in the process of deconstructing. Sometimes when we're building or when we're learning, we have to deconstruct. We have to get rid of some ideas that we had in order to build better ideas and move the pieces around so that they're actually in their right spot in this puzzle. Right. So I'm not going to try and complicate your life, but I'm going to try and explain to you what God is doing here in one sentence. Okay. That is this: God has given every human being free will, which means that God has given us the opportunity to do whatever we want to do, to believe whatever we want to believe. And the amount of beliefs are across the spectrum. There's every belief under the sun. And then God's goal is to save as many people as possible, even people who are blinded. This is important. Those people who are blinded, those people who died without knowing God, they had free choice. God's as interested in them as he is in you and I and everybody else. All humans are his creation. And the question is, and this is the plan of God, is how is God going to save people who have free will and can decide whatever they want? That's his plan. And when you understand that, then you understand what God is doing here. And that's, to be right up front with you, that's what I'm trying to explain. That's what the Bible explains, is how God is going to save humans with free will.
That's food for thought. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Okay. And the answer to that, it's not a 2-minute answer. So we have to get into it, and we have to be patient with ourselves. We have to be patient with ourselves. And it takes a little bit of time. It's one, when we put this puzzle together, this big, huge puzzle together, it's one piece at a time. And sometimes we have to move a piece around, and sometimes we have to put it aside because we don't see how it fits. And so it's the same thing here. There are going to be questions come up. When a question comes up, that's a puzzle piece. And if we don't understand it, then we just put it aside and we be patient with ourselves. And then another puzzle piece will fit into place. And then all of a sudden, boom, that one will fit. I shouldn't do this. We should end here. But I'm going to tell you something that I've always wondered when it says God made man, humans, in his likeness and his image. Right? Why does he say likeness and image? Why are there two there? Most of us, we all always say we're made in the image of God, the image. What about likeness? Why two? And what's the difference between likeness and image? Okay. Well, I think I understand it now, but I'm not going to tell you until another time.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It
Very
is.
good. Thank you.
Okay. But I've been at this for what is it? Since I can't even remember now. 68 was when I began to learn about. No, it was before. It was 66 when I began to learn about God. And all of this. And I figured out, I think God, shows me through study and all of that, the difference between likeness and image just about a month ago, 2 months ago. So, I've waited a long, long time to figure out that piece. And there are other pieces I don't understand. So, it's a process. It's a process. So be patient with yourself. And, as we go into the pieces and as you put the pieces together at your pace.
Yes, thank you very much. I will look forward to likeness and image. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. And we shall see you next time. We're going to end here. Okay. Okay, so thank you for joining me. Boy, we did go a little longer this time, but I think it was interesting as well. So
Yes.
we shall see you next month on the third Thursday. I don't know what the date is, but we'll be posting it.